Good evening. This is a meeting of the Revere City Council's Ways and Means Committee, Subcommittee. And on tonight's agenda, we have one item. I'll first announce the committee members who are present. We have Councilors Guanasso, Councilor Haas, Councilor Morabito, and Councilor Zambuto. And we also have Councilor Patch and Councilor McKenna, who are not members of the committee. We have, as I said, one item on the agenda today. It is Council Motion 15-254. It's a City Council motion presented by myself and a few colleagues regarding the 16 budget and to get a little bit more information about any pay raises that have been given out or additional personnel that have been added. I know the Director of Finance has provided the committee with, and I think the whole council, with a breakdown in our packet. And George, I believe there's also a new spreadsheet that was presented. I don't know if you want to address what you've presented before us. I know there might be some changes between what was given to us in our packet and what is presented tonight.
Good evening. I submitted to you a schedule, and on that schedule, as the council order had stated, that anybody that was hired or received any raises since the budget was passed on in July. So it's from July 1st on. And I have listed here for you all those people who have the changes that have been made in the various departments with personnel, as far as it's concerned with personnel. I also listed for you and gave the city council, submitted to the council, information that would assist them in understanding why certain decisions were made. There were temporary 60-day hires, there were temporary 90-day hires, and then the two personnel were injured in the police academy and they're on workman's comp, so that would increase our workman's comp. And then there were some changes in some of the positions in the departments. One in the city collector's office, where an employee went to the building department, and one employee who was hired as the driver for elderly affairs after the previous driver resigned. Going to the next block, it tells you how 4 hours were increased and they were paid from a grant, and some hours were decreased because the employee is taking less hours so they can attend classes. Then they increased hours in one department, but however, there was no change in the budget of the department. Then because of union regulations, the bottom 4 people were assigned to a higher classification because of the absence of the previous employee or the original employee. And according to union contracts, if you work in a position, somebody is absent from a position for a number of days, and another employee at a lower level is doing that position, they would receive the additional salary, and that's according to union contract. There was a reorganization in the Department of Community Development and Economic Development. The former Director of Community Development retired and went on a part-time basis, and there was a new hire, and the department was reorganized, and I have given you in your packet what the reorganization looks like. And then, excuse me, and then on top of that, I've submitted to the City Council the communications of what the additional duties of the new Director of Community Development development and economic development would be. And for that reason, there was an adjustment in that salary. So, and that's explained here, where the retired person who's coming back part-time will be working 18 hours per week, and the increase in the GDB G grant, CDBG grant, with the combined positions, would also increase that number there at, if you see in that line is incorrect, it goes to the number that's in the bottom part of the chart on the far to the right. So those are the differences in the personnel. We don't see any at this time, and there's also a chart that I submitted for the council's edification, that with this reorganization, there would be a savings of funds. And that chart has been submitted to the council, so there's a savings of funds with that taking, with the combination of the departments. So you have that information in front of you. With that, we don't see, I sat down with the Board of Assessors and the city auditor and discussed what the outlook for the budget was, and for, as this, the status of it as this time of year. We don't see any deficits occurring. I mean, you know, deficits can occur even though we're saying it now is no deficits, but because of the fact that we don't know what changes may happen during the year. You could have periods where there could be either new hires, there could be situations where somebody goes on workman's comp and then you have to pick up that person on workman's comp and then replace that person temporarily on the in the role, depending on the role they play in the original department they were in. But as of right now, we don't see any deficits in the departments. The budget was set, as I said it in a transmittal letter, as I said in the transmittal letter, was set with the best estimates of the financial team at the time it was submitted. Some adjustments have come up. Additional appropriations have come up tonight, submitted to you from the mayor, which will be, I believe, before the council tonight. And that was all taken care of within the Proposition 2.5 guidelines, so there doesn't need to be an additional stabilization appropriation to actually appropriate those amounts. So that's exactly what I've submitted to you. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thanks, George. Any members of the committee? Councilor Haas.
George, looking at this, these, forgetting the fire and police, okay, that's contractual. As far as all the others, why wasn't the city council brought up to date as far as these increases in the budget? Because all we're supposed to do, the city council, is approve the bottom line on the budget.
Well, what was happening here, so you're only talking about the top box. The other parts of the boxes did not increase the budget. They were taken, people that were put in place were short-term appointments, and they took the place of other people, other personnel who were on workman's comp. Now, as far as the reorganization and community development, that was done with the use of, for the most part, with the use of grant money. It wasn't additionally appropriated money. So the amount that you see, the $29,788.72, that's the amount that's coming out of the grant. And it didn't require any further appropriation other than the fact it came out of the CDBG grant.
But again, as I look at that, okay, for anyone to get 29,000 and then 19,000 in the bottom bracket, that's a lot of money, whether it's coming from city funds or from grant money. And where is the new employee listed on here for who took over Frank's position?
She's Bethany Rosa, which is the first line in the on the first line of the that chart.
So what's she being paid?
$75,000. It's on the other chart.
on the other chart.
Yeah, it's on the other
What's the
chart.
difference between this chart and the other chart?
Not this chart. The difference between this chart,
This is-
the other chart like this.
This is current.
Right, this is current. There was a mistake on that incorrect amount on the top right-hand column. The 29,788, I had it listed at 27, and when we add it all up again, it was 29. So it was an addition mistake, and the amount that you see on the footnote should equal that. I see the footnote is wrong now, should be the 29,788.72.
But if these were granted in August, why is it here November 30th, going into the last month of the calendar year? Why wasn't it brought to our attention as far as these increases?
Well, I think the feeling was the fact that it was done under a grant, and no, I understand what you're saying, but the total amount of the money.
City money.
Well, it's city money, but the city money was appropriated in the budget,
Right.
okay? Even though it was a grant, it was appropriated in the budget, and the way it was distributed still stayed under that amount. There's a chart here, which I submitted, which shows the breakdown of duties, okay? And actually, first is the letter, and then the second part of it shows the different responsibilities of the new Director of Community Development, Economic Development, and what role the former Director of Community Development will be playing as far as in the new breakdown in the new organization. And then it has a list of the employees. Do you have this chart?
That's the organization chart,
The organization, that's
Right.
correct. You have that.
which we have.
And that will show that exactly all the people that, who are involved in what positions in community development. Now, there was a further chart I have there, one second, which was submitted to you. And on that chart, I hope I didn't leave that chart in my office, but it showed a breakdown, and I know you have the old one there, showed the breakdown of the cost, and then the end results, there was a savings of amount of monies by taking the reorganization into account. Let me just see here. So that chart was submitted to you. However, that chart has since been.
You talking about this chart, George?
Yes, that's the chart I'm talking about, yeah.
That's in error, though, correct?
That's an error, that's off by $2,000, the same $2,000 that was, that we found when we added up. What happened was that I wanted to make certain that it was totally noted that the effect of the educational incentive on all these salary amounts, so that we had left it off at the beginning, and then we, when I looked at it, I said, I want to show a total amount of what the increase would be, so.
I'm not going to speak too much on this, but again.
No, go ahead.
I'm somewhat taken back that you had a reorganization within the community development. We all knew Frank was leaving. He was hired, again, part-time.
Right.
And you hired another person from Alden to replace Frank. Would that be correct?
That's correct.
Okay?
I
And
didn't
then,
hire anybody.
huh?
I didn't hire anybody, but that's,
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
the thing is,
Yeah.
we're left in the dark once again.
yeah.
And I think it's embarrassing as elected official to see these amounts coming up. You know, we heard it in, Tony, all to his credit, mentioned last month, we don't want to get in a witch hunt or talk about innuendos, et cetera. But here we see, other than the fire and police, two people, one person getting $18,990 and the other person getting $29,788.72 increase.
Right.
That's a lot of money.
Okay, I'm not finding that chart here. Okay.
Good. I'm all done.
Thank you, Councilor Has. Councilor Zambudo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see what's happened here is a reorganization and someone taking on more responsibility and being paid with grant money, which does not come before the city council. You can say you're taken back. I'm not taken back. I see the figures here. I see the responsibilities that have been given out here. I see where the money's coming from. There's been no money added to the budget here. If someone can show me where there was money added to the budget that's not grant money, then all I see here is a saving of $68,000 because of the reorganization. That's what I see here. Now, unless I'm reading something wrong, I don't see anything wrong with these figures that are presented before us tonight. I mean, are we saying we want to change the structure of the city council and we want to be responsible for the grant money and want to be notified? That's a different story. That's a different argument.
Right.
That is not what was in place when this was done. I've looked these over closely because I was concerned at first glance when I saw that, you know, there was extra money until I realized that there were extra duties. The person at the top of this list here, I guess we're leaving names out. Is that what we're doing on purpose? Or, well, the new director of economic development and planning is now John Fester. And that's the guy we're talking about with the $29,000. You're calling it an increase. I'm calling it part of his salary from further responsibilities other than what he was doing. Most of his salary, I think, is paid by a grant. So, you know, we're talking apples, not oranges here. Innuendo and rumors to what the facts are here. And I'm glad that we're having this meeting tonight because what we're doing is putting the facts on the table. And the way I view these facts, there's nothing wrong here, nothing at all. It's completely transparent. Now, if you want to go in the future and micromanage these grants, I probably would vote for that. I don't think I'd have a problem with that. But as things are set up right now, this minute, everything was done properly here, as far as I'm concerned, as far as I can see, unless somebody wants to prove to me that something was done underhandedly or in some sort of a backroom way. You can try to convince me of that, but I don't see that here. I see everything that's happened here was above board, and the figures are right in front of us here, and I don't see us dipping into any stabilization to pay these things, and that's really all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Zambuto. And I think from my own perspective, the issue, the biggest issue that I see is the fact that we have a memo from July 28th that we didn't get until we asked for it, until we put a motion in. So while maybe legally everything, and I hope everything is done legally in City Hall, but while legally everything may be okay, I think the notification and the way that things are presented and brought to our attention can be fixed. And I think that's part of maybe this discussion, is to make sure that people don't feel like they're being caught off guard, and that when there are changes in organizational changes or structure or pay raises, that the city council is informed maybe ahead of time, and that there's some good a good feeling of information sharing, and that there's an ability for a conversation to be had, rather than what I think we've seen in the past is this kind of pulling teeth to get information. And I think that's where, when we talk about the facts being on the table, they are only after the pulling of teeth. And I think that if we had a process set up that was a little bit more proactive and a little more inclusive with the city council, that would be helpful. And I agree on the grant money. I presented the motion earlier this year that, that grant money should come before the council. And even in my new role, I will still agree with that, you know, and I would like to have, I think there should be input in terms of how grant money gets spent. If we are spending, you know, $20,000 or, you know, it looks like another $95,000 in grant money, is that the highest and best use of that grant money? You know, I think that's a conversation that the council can be part of.
Well,
Councilor Zambudo.
as a point of information, this money comes from a CDBG grant, and it can only be used specifically in CDBG issues. But
And there are
I
a lot
agree
of-
with
a lot
you.
of issues
Listen,
that you
I
can-
agree with
you
you.
can spend.
Listen, I agree with you, and I'm all for these changes that it seems like you're going to make, and I'm going to support.
Right.
So I agree with you. It would be a better process in the future, and I'll support it.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Zambudo. Councilor Morabito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. George, I have a question. When looking at the organizational chart, I see a new hire for Green Community Coordinator. Who is that? Is that, there's no one mentioned on the...
Name, that's not filled. Yeah, that's something that they haven't filled yet.
So it's not filled?
No.
And what are we looking at a salary range for that person? Is that coming from grant funds?
I haven't said that. We haven't, the city hasn't said that. Have you said that? Oh, a net metering program, that's correct. We were going through discussions about a net metering program for electricity sources to the city. And we had actually talked to a number of companies on saving for our electricity over the next 20 years by using solar panels, the use of renting space on solar panels and getting our electricity from there. And those negotiations have not been concluded as yet. So if we got that, the savings we want to use from that was to put on the green community person.
So
we haven't completed that.
I guess I'm not...
Yeah, go ahead.
A little more clarification. So is that position, will that position be paid through a grant?
No, that, as it wasn't supposed to be a grant. What it was is that the city was negotiating a net metering contract with a energy supply company who has been given, by the Commonwealth, has given the ability to sell these net metering programs by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And the savings that we would get over the next 20 years, some of that savings were going into hire that person. But that hasn't been completed, so unless that gets completed, then we will be hiring that person. But right now, that negotiations with those people, with that company particularly, has not been completed.
And that new hire will come before the city council?
That new hire will come before the city council.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Morabito. Councilor Guanasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back in 1993, when I was the newly elected president of the City Council, one of the first things I sought to do was to change the organizations of subcommittees, and one of them was formerly was known as Budget Committee, which it was kind of limited in its jurisdictions, and that's why I created the Ways and Means, which I thought had more a useful effect in terms of showing the community exactly what it is rather than just a budgetary item type of thing. And what it shows now is it gives the leadway to oversight and review by this subcommittee, which is like a watchguard over the people's businesses as conducted by the city. And there's nothing wrong with making inquiry to these particular types of activity, just to put everybody on the same playing field and to show them that, you know, obviously people will review what's taking place, and we have been doing it right along with the great cooperation of our financial director. Certainly, putting together a chart as clear as this is indicated in spelling out the various amounts. And that's always been my intention, that when we reviewed people's salaries, that, you know, a name not be placed with that we have that's why we're elected. We're elected to have that kind of authority, that, so we know what's there, but just show the people that, exactly what we have in mind, and that we're watching this, but I don't think you have to put a name next to it, basically, as long as we know about it. And so there are classified information that we should have and have knowledge of without the whole world knowing about it. But again, come year end every year, graciously, the Revere Journal publishes every public employee's salary. So again, that's public knowledge there, and testimony to the fact of how it's created. Is that a police officer gets overtime, and paid details, and so our budgetary items are pretty much spelled out in the Revere Journal in terms of salaries and wages. And as far as the other expenditures that we make, we know for a fact that it's so limited, the amount of monies available to us to do these various other projects, that it doesn't amount to that much money. But 3/4 of the monies that's spent by our city is for salaries and wages, as rightfully so. That's the way it should be. So I think that what we're doing here, Mr. Chairman, I think is the right thing. I think that the review process is to make certain that we feel comfortable with how our city is being run financially. And so this gives us a better understanding of these positions that were questioned. And I think tonight's information as presented by the director is suffice. I think it shows us what's the direction we're doing with these salaries. And so I applaud everyone here for taking the time and effort to come together and to review this process and to show our city that, here it is, this is what we're doing, and these are the individuals and how we're getting to that point. Sometimes there's a little mystery in when it comes to salaries and wages, and people start to second guess. So these types of discussions certainly bring it to the forefront and spell it out what it is. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this forward, and thank you, Mr. Director, for the efforts put forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Guadasso. Council President Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't question whether or not the person that received the monies as salaries deserves it or not. That's up to the mayor, really, or the department head who oversees that department. What I do feel very strongly about, and I know you touched on it, as did Councilor Zambuto, that we are here as a watchdog for the citizens of this city, for the monies expended by this city council. Now, some people might say, well, grants are something that, they're not in the budget. True. Local aid is money coming from the Commonwealth. That's, in essence, a grant of some sort that comes from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and not the taxpayers in the city of Revere. So we have oversight of that. I think it's important that any person, whether they're hired for 3 months, a year, whatever, contractual, that this city council be aware of that person, what their duties are, and what their responsibilities are. And one of the reasons for that, in my mind, is that, you walk around the City Hall, I'm up here every day, and sometimes you see somebody that's been hired, and you don't even know who they are or why they've been hired. And I think it's important that we have that information before us. And, you can say that, well, so-and-so was hired under a grant, and they're getting $50,000 a year. That's true. Many cases, but we don't know about their health insurance. That's something that the city of Revere is picking up the tab on. A person can be working as on a grant and getting health insurance that's costing the city maybe $12,000 a year. And if you've got a dozen people getting that health insurance, now you're up into the $100,000 range or better. So I think it's important, and I hope it's something that the new administration, and I'm sure will, keep us informed of any hires, the monies they receive, and where that money is coming from if it's not in a budget, and what type of monies we do receive for grants that come into the city that maybe a grant for someone's salary could be used better to do some sidewalks in the city, depending on where the money's coming from, which are in dire disrepair. So that is my position on this, and I trust it'll be the position of the new administration coming in January 4th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any other councilors wish to speak? Councilor Has.
Judge, could you just verify, is Bethel, who's,
Rosa,
Rosa, okay?
Bethel Rosa.
Is she employed by the city?
Here she is.
Okay. When will you be coming before the city council?
For,
Waiver of residency requirement.
she has 6 months to do that, decide whether she's gonna live in the city or, go to the ordinance, or whether she's gonna actually live in the city. So she has 6 months from the date of hire.
Right, okay.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for coming up tonight to address the situations. Again, I don't want to be repetitive, but again, it's hard to work with a system that you don't know where all the pieces are. And I think we should really resolve that this evening. And again, I mentioned no names in this. I hope you understand that. But again, we have to get control over what's going on in the city.
I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Has. Councilor Patch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the, we seem to be just zoning in on one grant here that went to community development. But I know that in the past, I used to fight for, there was grants like in the police and fire department, and that the never came before the council. That wisely was sometimes not so with the way the grant money was used, and especially in the past minute, not the administration now, but prior administrations, that I didn't think was wisely used. But we had, as councilors, I learned 8 years ago that we had not much say or no say in how they spent their grant money. For example, grant money went was supposed to go for surveillance cameras, went for motor vehicles. And I kind of, that was kind of one of the first battles I took on the council. And again, I'm just saying that all I see here is that from 2015 to 2016 in the Department of Planning and Community Development, that we've saved $49,000. Granted that if as the new administration comes in, I will work along gladly if grants, we have some say in the grant and how it's spent. But I do think that it was spent wisely in the planning community development, that the director had to take on many duties, many new duties. He became the director of community and economic development, and he had to take on many new duties on the retirement of our friend Frank Strange. So again, whatever happens in the future, I hope that I mentioned the prior incident that I had when I first became a council, just for the fact that this has been going on for quite a while.
even probably before I was a counselor. And, you know, just, I hate to see it just being kind of like centered onto one issue. I just don't think that's fair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Council Patchen. And to your point on grants, I think, that's a conversation that, that needs to be had. We need to have a fuller, I think the council needs to know a little bit more about how grant money is being spent and have further breakdowns of that information. And I know there are some grants that are very specific in their use, and then I know with community development block grant money, you can do a lot of different things. There could be storefront improvements, there can be streetscape improvements. So there are things that can be done with that money that that help build capacity and maybe build better blocks of space. And I think to use it on salary increases is maybe a discussion to be had. It's a policy decision, and that's something that should be had with the council's input. And I think when we get more people in a room to discuss what the best use of money, and especially grant money, is, I think end up having a better solution. George, in terms of just kind of raises in general, I know we don't have a real process, right? There's no kind of way that that raises are given out, or any salary changes are made in a kind of orderly fashion. Is that correct? I mean, aside from you have union raises, and those are right. Those are contractual. But in terms of this, I'm guessing there was no. I mean, was there any kind of equation to the work that was being done, and that resulted in $30,000 raise, or was it?
Well, the equation was the additional amount of work that's being taken on, and the amount they tried to, they wanted to save. I handed you out a second sheet, chart, again replacing the first, that says there was savings of $49,000. So I think they took all of that into account and see what they would work for, and then they negotiated that, and then that's what the
And is there any plan for that 49 to be kind of repurposed in any way? Is that going to be used to build capacity to maybe help the Planning and Community Development Office plan, for the future of the city? Is that, is that money going to be yeah.
No, I don't know if that money is looking to be repositioned at this point. I don't think there's any plans for it. I think that right now, it's just going to be a savings of $49,000.
Okay. Okay. And in terms of, I know there were some hires based on people out on disability. Were those hires that were part of those or attributed to disability, were those people who went out on disability recently, or were they have they been out on disability for a while?
Well, there are a few that went on recently, depending on who you're speaking about. As far as the policemen, they were on the police academy too. They went on, I believe, in August of this year. I have to watch out for the HIPAA rule here. So the ones that were in Public Works were more recent, and those are the two groups. And now there's another recent one that just happened on Public Works. That was a phone call today.
Okay. And one final question. I know in the budget we had somebody, a job description for transportation specialist. It sounds like that is now changed to a principal clerk. That wasn't brought before the council, and so I don't know if that should have been or not.
Which transportation?
So it's in the Elder, I think the Elder Affairs Department.
What happened, right, what happened?
In the
was
budget,
person
there,
resigned.
it's a transportation specialist, but
They
they're
got paid.
listed as a principal clerk
Yeah,
currently,
they
so.
went from a part-time position to a full-time position. They went from, the person resigned who was doing it, and when he came over, they gave him a stipend and gave him the amount of money to pay the same as a principal clerk.
So is that a full-time position now?
I believe so. I believe so, yes.
Because in the budget, it's 18, I think 18 and a half or 19 hours, and I thought that was what we had in what was given to
We had a
us.
budget, but what happened is since then, the person who was of ill health, again, I have to be careful here, who's in ill health, resigned, and then the other person took over the position, the new person.
Okay. And finally, I think to Councilor Hazard's point, is there any reason why this wasn't brought before the council earlier? I mean, obviously, there was information shared about reorganization in July. I think going forward, obviously, I'll have some say in what happens going forward, but
Right.
I think these are the types of things that need to be brought before the council, and in a faith of, a good faith effort to work with the council and be able to keep people apprised of what's going on, so.
Okay.
Any other councilors? Right. With that, I'll close the. Yeah,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
please state your name and address.
William Bell, 259 Romney Road, Revere, longtime Revere resident. I want to congratulate all of you for your re-elections and potentially your election. I heard Mr. Anzoni say something about 6 months for a new employee out of the city to decide whether they want to live in Revere. Well, I was the one that put the Revere residency clause in, and I don't remember any automatic waiver for 6 months. All I remember is you're a Revere resident, they have preference. Unless the ordinance was changed or amended, I don't know, maybe Counselor, where does the 6 months come in? I don't think it's fair for a Revere resident to be bypassed for a non-Revere resident. I know Counselor Janino has voted a few times against waivers. I don't believe out of 55,000 people in Revere, there isn't one person that could have taken that job in community development. I don't know if it was advertised. That question wasn't asked by any of the members of the board. Was it public? Could you ask that through?
I did not ask it, but I've asked in the past for everything to be publicly posted, and we ought to be using, as many methods to get information out and let people know that there are jobs
That
available.
should be very explicit. The job should have been advertised. And I'm not blaming one person. Maybe that's been the procedure. But I definitely think there shouldn't be anyone getting a job in Revere, except if they're statutory waived, like police and firefighters, and I believe school teachers, not living in Revere when Revere people are qualified. It happened down the library recently in the last few months, and a junior clerk, I'm sure there's hundreds of people in Revere, single mothers, whatever, that could have qualified. In this particular job, I don't know what the qualifications were. I don't know if you people were informed. But I would think in the future, the council and whoever's going to be the mayor in January get together and make sure that every Revere resident knows of any potential jobs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. And to your point on the 6-month waiver, I believe that contractually in our collective bargaining agreement language, we've given, historically, we've given workers or employees 6 months to move into the city. So I don't know if that, I know that's in some of the collective bargaining agreements. I don't know if that's been carried over into the city ordinances. Ms. Fester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. I won't take a lot of time. I just wanted to clarify just two things. One is on the CDBG funding that we have. That is something that we have a public hearing on every year in terms of where that money is going to be allocated. So if you want to get in more depth on that in the future, that is fine, and I'd be all for that. But I just want to let you know, there is a public hearing on that every year, on the funding, the mechanism, where it's going to be allocated, and where the funds are going. Second, I wanted to clarify just one other thing, that on Ms. Rosa, she is the Community Development Program Manager. She's not taking over Frank Stringy's responsibilities. What she's doing, she is the manager of the CDBG program. What we're trying to do on that's like the catalyst of a lot of things that we do. So one of the things we're trying to do is that position is very specific in nature. There were 12 applicants. That position was advertised. There were 12 applicants, none were from Revere because of the specificity of that particular program. And the woman that was hired has a specific knowledge in that particular field for 12 years. And we're trying to expand that program even further to try to receive additional funding. So she's focusing her efforts particularly on that, and I think Mr. Anzoni said that, on that particular segment, whereas all the other responsibilities for Mrs. Stringy's retirement, I'm taking over and handling that. But I just wanted to clarify that, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that in the future that you may have pertaining to community development or economic development. Okay?
Thank you. Any other councilors have any comments? With that, I will close the meeting of the City Council's Ways and Means Subcommittee. Thank you.